The words still burned in Arthur Caldwell's mind, sharp as the day his son, Michael, spat them across the mahogany desk in the penthouse office of Caldwell Enterprises. It was a Tuesday, gray and heavy with the kind of rain that made New York City feel like it was drowning in its own ambition. Arthur, 78, sat in his leather chair, his hands steady despite the tremor that had started creeping into them lately. His son's face, once so boyish, so full of promise, had twisted into something unrecognizable, a mask of greed and impatience. "Why don't you just hurry up and die, Dad?" Michael had said, his voice low, venomous. "You're holding onto this company like it's your lifeline. Let it go. Let me have it." Arthur didn't flinch. He'd built this empire from a single hardware store in Queens, turning it into a conglomerate that spanned real estate, tech, and manufacturing. Every brick, every deal, every sleepless night had his name carved into it. But those words, hurry up and die, cut deeper than any boardroom betrayal. They weren't just about the company. They were about him. Deal. Arthur's silence in that moment wasn't weakness. It was the weight of a father realizing his son saw him as an obstacle, not a man. He'd always known Michael was ambitious. But this was different. This was personal. The office, with its panoramic view of Manhattan's skyline, felt suddenly claustrophobic. Arthur's gaze drifted to a framed photo on his desk, him, Michael, and Clara, Michael's ex-wife, smiling at a company gala years ago. Clara, with her sharp mind and warm laugh, had been the daughter he never had. But Michael had pushed her away, his ego unable to handle her rising star within the company. Their divorce had been bitter, and Arthur hadn't seen her in years. He stood, straightened his tie, and walked out of the office without a word to Michael. The elevator ride down 60 floors felt like a descent into a new reality. He wasn't just a businessman anymore. He was a father who'd lost his son long before that cruel outburst. Outside, the rain soaked his coat, but he barely noticed. His mind was elsewhere, replaying decades of sacrifices, nights missed at home, birthdays forgotten, all for the empire Michael now demanded. By the time he reached his Upper East Side townhouse, Arthur's resolve had hardened. He wasn't ready to die. Not yet. And he wasn't ready to hand over his life's work to someone who saw him as a means to an end. He poured a glass of scotch and sat by the fireplace, the crackling flames mirroring the anger flickering in his chest. He thought of Clara, her resilience, her brilliance. She'd been the one to spearhead the company's tech division, turning it into a powerhouse before Michael's jealousy drove a wedge between them. Arthur had always regretted not fighting harder to keep her in the fold. The next morning, he called his lawyer, Evelyn Strauss, a woman who'd been with him since the early days. "I want to rewrite my will," he said, his voice steady. "Everything, the company, the estate, the trusts, it goes to Clara." Evelyn paused, her pen hovering over her notepad. "Arthur, this is significant. Michael's your only child. Are you sure?" "More sure than I've ever been," he replied. "He wants me gone. Fine. But he doesn't get to inherit what he doesn't respect." Over the next week, Arthur worked in secret, ensuring every detail was ironclad. He didn't tell Michael. He didn't tell anyone. The decision felt like a rebellion against time itself, a way to reclaim the legacy he'd built. Clara deserved it, not just because she'd been wronged, but because she understood the company's soul. She'd once pitched a vision for sustainable tech that could have changed the industry. But Michael had dismissed it as unprofitable. Arthur saw now that Clara had been the future he'd failed to nurture. He tracked her down through an old colleague. She was in Boston, running a small startup focused on green energy. Her LinkedIn profile showed a woman in her late 40s. Her dark hair streaked with gray, her eyes still sharp with that fire he'd always admired. He sent her an email, Cryptic but warm. Clara, I owe you a conversation. Can we meet? She agreed, and they scheduled a meeting at a quiet cafe in Boston. Arthur spent the days leading up to it wrestling with doubt. Would she think he was manipulating her? Would she even care about the company after what Michael had put her through? He didn't know, but he had to try. The cafe was tucked away on a cobblestone street, its windows fogged with the chill of early fall. Clara arrived first, sitting at a corner table, her posture straight but her expression guarded. When Arthur walked in, she stood, and for a moment, they just looked at each other, two people who'd once been family, now strangers bound by shared wounds. Arthur, she said, her voice neutral but not cold. It's been a while. Too long, he replied, sitting across from her. I'm sorry for that. They ordered coffee, and he told her everything, Michael's words, the betrayal, the years of regret. Clara listened, her face unreadable at first, but her eyes softened as he spoke. I never wanted to leave the company, she admitted. It was my home as much as it was yours. But Michael, he made it impossible. I know, Arthur said, his throat tight. And I didn't stop him. That's on me. Clara shook her head. You couldn't have changed him. He wanted control, not collaboration. Arthur leaned forward, his hands clasped. I'm leaving it all to you. Clara. The company. The assets. Everything. I want you to take it and make it what it should have been. Her eyes widened, and for the first time, she looked truly stunned. Arthur, why me? After all this time? Because you're the only one who ever saw it the way I did, he said, not as a prize, but as a responsibility, a way to build something that lasts. Clara stared into her coffee, her fingers tracing the rim of the cup. I don't know if I can accept that, she said finally. It's too much. And Michael made his choice. Arthur cut in, his voice firm. This is mine. They talked for hours, the conversation shifting from the past to the future. Clara spoke of her startup, her passion for sustainable tech, her dream of making a difference. Arthur saw the same spark he'd noticed years ago, undimmed by time or bitterness. By the time they parted, she hadn't said yes, but she hadn't said no either. I need time to think, she told him. This isn't just about me. It's about what the company could be. Arthur nodded, respecting her caution. Take all the time you need. But know this, I trust you to do what's right. As he left the cafe, the weight in his chest felt lighter, though the ache of Michael's words lingered. He'd taken the first step, not toward death, but toward a legacy that might outlive him in the way he'd always hoped. Back in New York, Arthur threw himself into work with a vigor he hadn't felt in years. The decision to leave his empire to Clara had ignited something in him, a sense of purpose he thought he'd lost to age and routine. Caldwell Enterprises was still a titan in the industry, but it had grown stagnant, coasting on past successes. Arthur saw now that he'd been complicit in that stagnation, too comfortable with the status quo. Clara's vision, her focus on innovation and sustainability, could be the jolt the company needed. But first, he had to prepare it for her. He spent days reviewing the company's operations, digging into reports he'd once skimmed. The tech division, Clara's old domain, was underperforming, its projects safe but uninspired. Arthur called meetings with the division heads, demanding updates and pushing for bolder ideas. We're not here to play it safe, he told them, his voice carrying the weight of a man who'd just been told to die. We're here to lead. His intensity startled them. Some whispered that the old man was losing it, others that he was finally waking up. Michael, meanwhile, was oblivious to Arthur's plans. He strutted through the office, barking orders and eyeing the corner office as if it were already his. Arthur watched him from a distance, noting the way he dismissed colleagues, the way he prioritized flash over substance. It wasn't just greed. It was entitlement, as if the empire was his birthright rather than something earned. Arthur's heart ached for the boy who'd once followed him around hardware stores, wide-eyed and eager. That boy was gone, replaced by a man who saw his father as an obstacle to be removed. One evening, Arthur found himself alone in the office, the city's lights glittering below. He pulled out Clara's old business proposals from the archive's dog-eared folders filled with her handwritten notes. She'd outlined a plan for solar-powered data centers, a project Michael had shot down as too risky. Arthur read through her calculations, her meticulous projections, and saw what he'd missed back then, a vision that balanced profit with purpose. He felt a pang of guilt for letting her go so easily, for not fighting for her place in the company. He called Evelyn again. "Make sure the will is airtight," he said. "Michael will fight this." "He will," Evelyn agreed, her voice calm but firm. "He's already sniffing around, asking about your health, your plans. He's not stupid, Arthur. He'll sense something's coming." "Let him sense it," Arthur replied. "He won't know until it's done." Evelyn hesitated. "Have you considered telling him? Giving him a chance to, I don't know, redeem himself?" Arthur's laugh was bitter. "He told me to hurry up and die. Evelyn, that's not a man looking for redemption." The lawyer didn't argue. She'd seen enough of Michael's behavior over the years, his temper, his need to dominate every room. Instead, she promised to finalize the documents within the week. Arthur hung up and poured another scotch, the burn of it grounding him. He wasn't just rewriting his will. He was rewriting his legacy. Clara, meanwhile, was wrestling with Arthur's offer. She'd built a life in Boston, a small but thriving startup that aligned with her values. Returning to Caldwell Enterprises meant stepping back into a world that had chewed her up and spat her out. She remembered the late nights, the boardroom battles, the way Michael's charm had soured into manipulation. But she also remembered the rush of shaping something massive, of turning ideas into reality on a scale her startup could never match. She called her closest friend, Maya, a no-nonsense engineer who'd been with her since the divorce. Over wine at Clara's cramped apartment, she spilled everything: Arthur's visit, the offer, the weight of it all. "It's insane," Clara said, pacing. "He's handing me an empire. Why me? Why now?" Maya leaned back, swirling her glass. "Because he sees what Michael doesn't. You're not just smart, Clara. You care. Arthur knows you'll protect what he built, not just exploit it." "But it's his son's legacy too," Clara countered. "I'd be taking that from him." Maya snorted. "Michael took that from himself when he treated you like a threat and Arthur like a relic. This isn't about revenge. It's about what's right." Clara stared out her window at the Boston skyline, smaller than New York's, but no less alive. She thought of her team, her startup's mission to make clean energy accessible. Caldwell Enterprises could amplify that mission, give her the resources to change the world. But it would also mean facing Michael again, navigating his inevitable fury. She wasn't sure she had the stomach for it. Back in New York, Arthur began quietly reaching out to allies within the company, veteran executives who'd known Clara, who'd respected her work. He didn't reveal the full plan, only hinted at changes coming. "We need fresh blood," he told them. "Someone who understands the future, not just the past." Most nodded, intrigued. A few, loyal to Michael, raised eyebrows but said nothing. Arthur knew he was walking a tightrope. One misstep, and Michael would catch wind of the plan before it was finalized. Late one night, Arthur found himself at the old hardware store in Queens. now a flagship location for Caldwell Enterprises. The shelves were sleek, modern, but he could still see the scuffed wooden floors of his youth, smell the sawdust and paint. He'd started here, a kid with big dreams and a knack for deals. Now, standing in the same spot, he felt the full arc of his life, every triumph, every regret. He didn't want to die. Not yet. But he wanted to leave something behind that mattered. Clara was his chance to do that. He locked up the store and stepped into the chilly night, his breath visible in the air. Tomorrow, he'd call Clara again, see if she'd made a decision. For now, he walked home, the city's pulse steady around him, a reminder that he still had time to make things right. Clara's decision didn't come easily. She spent days poring over Arthur's offer, weighing the risks against the possibilities. Her startup was her sanctuary, a place where she controlled the vision, where her team felt like family. Caldwell Enterprises was a colossus by comparison, sprawling, complex, and shadowed by her past with Michael. But the more she thought about it, the more she saw Arthur's offer for what it was, not just a gift, but a challenge. Could she take a corporate giant and bend it toward her ideals? Could she honor Arthur's trust without losing herself? She met with her startup team, laying out the situation in a cramped conference room that smelled of coffee and whiteboard markers. If I do this, she told them, it's not just about me. It's about scaling what we're doing here, clean energy, real impact. But it means leaving you all, at least for a while. Her lead engineer, Javier, leaned forward. Clara, you built this place from nothing. If anyone can take on a beast like Caldwell Enterprises and make it better, it's you. We'll manage. Her CFO, Priya, nodded. You've always said we need to think bigger. This is bigger. Their support steadied her, but the fear lingered. She remembered Michael's cold dismissal during their marriage, the way he'd undermined her ideas to bolster his own ego. Facing him again would be like walking into a lion's den. Still, she couldn't shake Arthur's words. You're the only one who ever saw it the way I did. She owed it to him and to herself to at least try. She called Arthur on a crisp October morning. I'm in, she said, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. But I have conditions. I want autonomy over the tech division, and I want to bring my core team. We do this my way, or not at all. Arthur's laugh crackled through the phone, warm and relieved. I wouldn't have it any other way. Come to New York next week. We'll start planning. In New York, Arthur was moving pieces like a chess grandmaster. He met discreetly with board members, gauging their loyalty. Most were tired of Michael's posturing, his tendency to prioritize short-term gains over long-term stability. We need vision. One director, a grizzled veteran named Helen, told him over lunch. Michael's smart, but he's no leader. If you've got a plan, Arthur, I'm listening. He didn't tell her about Clara yet, only hinted at a successor who'd shake things up. Helen raised an eyebrow but didn't press. Arthur knew she'd back him when the time Kamesht always valued results over politics. Michael, however, was growing suspicious. He cornered Arthur in the office one afternoon, his jaw tight. You're up to something. Dad, I hear you've been meeting with the board, digging into old files. What's going on? Arthur met his son's gaze, searching for a trace of the boy he'd raised. I'm doing what I've always done. Michael, protecting the company. Michael's eyes narrowed. Protecting it from what? Me. Arthur didn't answer. He turned and walked away, leaving Michael fuming in the hallway. The confrontation confirmed what Arthur already knew. His son would fight tooth and nail to keep control. Arthur quickened his pace, calling Evelyn from the elevator. We need to move faster, he said. He's onto me. Evelyn promised to have the final documents ready by the end of the week. "I've got the best estate lawyers in the city on this," she said. "Michael won't break it, no matter how hard he tries." Arthur spent the next few days preparing Clara's return. He cleared out an office suite for her and her team, ensuring it had the resources they'd need to hit the ground running. He also began quietly shifting funds, setting up a trust that would give Clara financial flexibility to pursue her vision. Every move was calculated, designed to lock Michael out without triggering an early battle. When Clara arrived in New York, the city felt both familiar and foreign. She stepped off the plane at JFK, her suitcase light but her mind heavy. Arthur met her at a midtown hotel, his face more lined than she remembered, but his eyes bright with purpose. Over dinner, they mapped out a strategy. Clara would join as a consultant first, giving her time to assess the company without drawing too much attention. "Michael's watching," Arthur warned. "We need to be careful until the will is finalized." Clara nodded, her mind already racing with ideas. "I've been looking at the tech division's numbers," she said. "They're sitting on a gold mine of patents, but doing nothing with them. I can change that." Arthur smiled, a rare warmth breaking through his usual reserve. "I knew I picked the right person." The next day, Clara walked into Caldwell Enterprises for the first time in years. The lobby gleamed with marble and glass, a monument to Arthur's ambition. Employees whispered as she passed, some recognizing her, others curious about the stranger with the confident stride. She met with the tech team, asking sharp questions and taking notes. They were hesitant at first, but her knowledge and passion won them over. By the end of the day, she'd identified 3 projects that could be fast-tracked innovations she'd dreamed of years ago. Michael caught wind of her presence by noon. He stormed into Arthur's office, his face red. "What the hell is Clara doing here? You're bringing her back. After everything." Arthur stayed calm, his hands folded on his desk. "She's a consultant. We need her expertise." "Expertise?" Michael scoffed. "She's my ex-wife. Dad, this is personal." "It's business," Arthur said, his tone final. "And you do well to remember that." Michael left, slamming the door. Arthur knew the real storm was coming. He called Clara that evening, his voice low. "He knows you're here. Be ready." Clara exhaled, staring out at the city from her hotel room. "I've been ready for years, Arthur." Clara threw herself into her role at Caldwell Enterprises with a focus that surprised even her. The tech division was a shadow of what it could be, bogged down by bureaucracy and safe bets. She spent her first week dissecting budgets, patents, and personnel files, identifying talent that had been overlooked and projects that had been shelved. Her team from Boston, Javier, Priya, and a handful of others joined her, their energy a stark contrast to the stale corporate culture. They worked late, sketching out plans for solar-powered servers and AI-driven efficiency tools. Clara felt alive, like she was finally back where she belonged. Arthur watched her progress from a distance, impressed but not surprised. He'd always known Clara had a gift for seeing what others missed. He met with her daily, often over coffee in his office, where they brainstorm ways to integrate her startup's ethos into the company's DNA. "We need to move fast," Clara told him one morning, her laptop open to a spreadsheet of timelines. "If we're going to pivot to sustainability, it starts with the tech division. That's the heart of it." Arthur nodded, his pride tempered by worry. Michael was circling, asking pointed questions to board members and digging into Clara's contract. Arthur knew his son was building a case, likely preparing to challenge the will before it was even revealed. Evelyn called with updates. "The documents are ready, but I'd feel better if we had more board support locked in. Michael's got allies." "Then we'll get the board," Arthur said. Clara's results will speak for themselves. Clara's presence was already making waves. She pitched a pilot program for green data centers to a small group of executives. Her slides crisp and her data undeniable. The room, initially skeptical, leaned in as she spoke. Her voice steady but passionate. This isn't just about optics, she said. It's about survival. The industry's shifting, and if we don't lead, we'll be left behind. By the end, 2 directors, Helen and a younger exec named Raj, were on board, promising to back her at the next board meeting. Michael, meanwhile, was unraveling. He cornered Clara in the hallway one afternoon, his tie loose and his eyes blazing. You think you can just waltz back in here? He snapped. This is my company. Clara. Mine. Clara didn't flinch. It's Arthur's company, she said coolly, and he decides what happens to it. Michael stepped closer, his voice low. You're here because he's sentimental. Don't mistake that for power. Clara held his gaze, her heart pounding but her face calm. I'm here because I'm good at this. Michael, you never understood that. He stormed off, but Clara knew he wasn't done. She called Arthur that evening, her voice tight. He's not just angry. He's scared. That makes him dangerous. Arthur agreed. I'm meeting with the board tomorrow. Lay low. Keep working. We're close. The board meeting was tense, held in a sleek conference room with views of Central Park. Arthur presented Clara's pilot program, letting her data do most of the talking. He spoke briefly but firmly. Clara's proven herself. She's not here to coast, she's here to lead. Helen and Raj backed him, citing her early results. Others hesitated, wary of Michael's influence. The meeting ended without a firm commitment, but Arthur sensed the tide turning. That night, Michael made his move. He called an impromptu gathering of his loyalists, mid-level managers, and a few board members, painting Clara as an outsider and Arthur as erratic. My father's not himself, he told them, his voice smooth but urgent. He's making reckless decisions. We need to protect the company. Some nodded, swayed by his charisma. Others stayed silent, unsure. Arthur caught wind of the meeting through Helen, who'd been tipped off by a loyal assistant. He didn't confront Michael directly. Instead, he invited Clara to a quiet dinner at his townhouse, where they strategized over steak and red wine. He's rallying his troops, Arthur said, cutting into his meal. We need to lock in the board before he does. Clara sipped her wine, her mind racing. Then let me present at the next meeting. Full pitch. All the data. My whole vision. If they see what I can do, they'll back us. Arthur agreed, impressed by her resolve. You've got one shot to win them over. Make it count. Clara spent the next 2 days refining her presentation, pulling all-nighters with her team. They built models showing cost savings, environmental impact, and market advantages. Javier mocked up a prototype interface for the AI tools, while Priya crunched numbers to counter any objections. By the time the board meeting loomed, Clara was ready, her nerves steady despite the stakes. The morning of the meeting, Arthur met her in the lobby. You've got this, he said, his hand briefly squeezing her shoulder. Clara nodded, her jaw set. She walked into the boardroom, her laptop under her arm, ready to fight for the future Arthur had entrusted to her. Michael was there, seated at the far end, his expression unreadable. Clara ignored him, focusing on the board 12 men and women who held the company's fate. She launched into her pitch, her voice clear, her slides sharp. She outlined a 5-year plan: green data centers, AI-driven logistics, partnerships with renewable energy firms. The numbers were solid, the vision bold. Helen nodded approvingly. Raj asked pointed questions she answered with ease. Even Michael's allies looked intrigued. When she finished, the room was quiet for a moment. Then Helen clapped, and others followed. Michael's face tightened, but he said nothing. Arthur caught Clara's eye, a faint smile breaking through his usual stoicism. They weren't out of the woods yet, but they'd just won a crucial battle. The board's reaction to Clara's pitch shifted the momentum, but the war was far from won. Michael didn't waste time. Within hours, he was working the phones, calling in favors and spreading doubt. Clara's a liability, he told one board member, his voice smooth as silk. She walked away once. What's to say she won't again? He leaned on his charm, his years of networking, painting himself as the steady hand against Arthur's erratic choices and Clara's unproven vision. Clara sensed the pushback. Emails from mid-level managers grew curt, and whispers followed her in the halls. She didn't let it show, but it stung. She'd fought too hard to reclaim her place here, only to face the same resistance she'd fled years ago. Over coffee with Javier, she vented. It's like Michael's poisoned the well. Half the company thinks I'm here to steal his throne. Javier shrugged, unfazed. Let them think what they want. You've got the numbers, the ideas. And Arthur, keep pushing. She did. Clara doubled down, meeting with department heads, winning over skeptics with data and passion. She toured facilities, asked workers about their challenges, and shared her plans for sustainable tech that could save jobs, not cut them. Slowly, she built allies engineers who saw her as a leader, not a threat. Priya ran cost analyses, proving the green initiatives could boost profits long-term. The tide was turning, but Michael was relentless. Arthur, meanwhile, was finalizing his legacy. He signed the revised will in Evelyn's office, the document a fortress of legal precision. Everything his shares, his properties, his trusts would go to Clara upon his death. He added a clause ensuring her autonomy over the tech division, protecting her from board interference. Evelyn reviewed it twice, her pen tapping the desk. This is bulletproof, she said. But Michael's not going to take it lying down. I know, Arthur said, his voice heavy. That's why we're not telling him until it's time. Arthur's health was a quiet concern. The tremor in his hands was worse, and his doctor had mentioned early Parkinson's. He hadn't told Clara, not wanting to burden her, but it fueled his urgency. He wanted the company secure before his body betrayed him. Late at night, he'd sit by his fireplace, staring at old photos Clara at a company picnic. Michael as a teenager, the family they'd once been. The memories hurt, but they also steeled his resolve. Michael escalated his campaign. He hired a private investigator to dig into Clara's startup, looking for financial missteps, anything to discredit her. The investigator found nothing. Clara ran a tight ship. Frustrated, Michael leaked rumors to industry blogs, suggesting Arthur was losing his grip, that Clara was manipulating him. The stories gained traction, and Clara felt the pressure mounting. She called Arthur, her voice tense. He's trying to bury me in the press. We need to go public with your plan. Arthur hesitated. Not yet. The board's still split. We need a majority locked in. Clara pushed back. The longer we wait, the more damage he does. Let me take the fight to him. Arthur relented, trusting her instincts. Clara organized a company-wide town hall, streamed to every office and factory. She stood on a stage in the Manhattan headquarters, her voice steady, her slides sharp. Caldwell Enterprises isn't just a business, she said. It's a legacy. Arthur built it to last, to innovate, to matter. I'm here to make sure it does. She laid out her vision: green tech, global impact, jobs preserved, Employees applauded, some standing. Michael, watching from the back, left early, his face a mask of fury. The town hall shifted the narrative. Board members who'd wavered started calling Clara, asking for one-on-one meetings. Helen and Raj rallied others, arguing that Clara's plan was the future. Michael's allies began to defect, swayed by her results and Arthur's quiet endorsement. By week's end, Arthur had the votes he needed. He called Clara to his office, his eyes tired but bright. "You did it," he said. "The board's yours." "Not yet," Clara replied. "We need to tell the world." They scheduled a press conference for the following Monday. Arthur would announce his decision, naming Clara as his successor in all but title until his passing. The move would blindside Michael, but it was necessary. Arthur wanted the world to know his choice before Michael could spin a counter-narrative. The night before the press conference, Clara couldn't sleep. She walked the streets of Manhattan, the city's pulse both comforting and overwhelming. She thought of her years with Michael, the way he'd diminished her, and of Arthur's faith in her now. She stopped at a park bench, staring at the skyline. This was her chance to build something lasting, to prove Michael wrong, to honor Arthur's trust. She wouldn't let it slip away. Arthur, too, was restless. He sat in his study, a glass of scotch untouched. He thought of Michael's words, "Hurry up," and Diane, the pain they'd caused. But he also thought of Clara, her strength, her vision. He'd made the right choice. For the first time in years, he felt at peace, even as the storm loomed. The press conference was held in the grand atrium of Caldwell Enterprises, with cameras flashing and reporters crowding the room. Arthur stood at the podium, his posture straight despite the tremor in his hands. Clara stood beside him, her expression calm but her eyes fierce. The board flanked them, a silent show of support. Michael was absent, though Arthur knew he was watching from somewhere, likely plotting his next move. Arthur spoke first, his voice steady. "For 50 years, I've built this company to be more than a business. It's a legacy of innovation, of purpose. Today, I'm ensuring that legacy endures." He paused, scanning the room. "I'm naming Clara Reynolds as my successor. Upon my passing, she will inherit full control of Caldwell Enterprises, its assets, its future." The room erupted gasps, murmurs, rapid typing from reporters. Clara stepped forward, her voice clear. "I'm honored by Arthur's trust. My goal is to make this company a leader in sustainable technology, to build a future that benefits us all." She outlined her plan briefly, focusing on impact over profit. The audience leaned in, some nodding, others scribbling furiously. The announcement hit like a thunderclap. Social media exploded, with industry analysts praising the move and others questioning Arthur's judgment. Michael's allies tried to spin it, leaking stories about Clara's opportunism. But the public response was overwhelmingly positive. Clara's track record, her startup success, and her clear vision drowned out the noise. Michael didn't stay quiet. Within hours, he released a statement, calling the decision a betrayal and vowing to challenge it legally. He hired a high-powered law firm, claiming Arthur was coerced, that Clara was unfit. Arthur had expected this. Evelyn's team was ready, the will ironclad. "He can fight," she told Arthur over the phone. "He won't win." Clara moved quickly, taking charge of the tech division with Arthur's blessing. She greenlit her pilot programs, allocating funds for solar-powered data centers and AI tools. Her team from Boston integrated seamlessly, their energy infectious. Employees who'd been skeptical began rallying behind her, inspired by her hands-on approach. She held town halls, listened to workers, and made changes small at first, but significant. A factory in Ohio switched to renewable energy. A software team rolled out a new logistics platform. The company was waking up. Arthur watched it all with a mix of pride and sorrow. His health was declining. Doctor visits confirmed the Parkinson's diagnosis. Though he kept it from Clara, he wanted her focused, not distracted by pity. He spent his days mentoring her, sharing decades of insights, preparing her for the battles ahead. "You'll face resistance," he told her one evening in his office. "Not just from Michael. The industry doesn't like change." Clara smiled, undaunted. "I've faced worse." Michael's legal challenge came a month later. A lawsuit claiming Arthur was mentally unfit when he revised his will. The case dragged on, but Evelyn's preparation held. Witnesses, board members, employees, even Arthur's doctor testified to his clarity of mind. Clara's early successes bolstered the case, showing she was no interloper but a leader. The court dismissed Michael's claims, though he vowed to appeal. By spring, Clara's vision was taking root. The tech division's profits ticked up, driven by her innovations. The board, once divided, now backed her unanimously. Arthur attended fewer meetings, his energy waning, but he followed every update. Clara visited him often, bringing plans and prototypes, her excitement contagious. "We're doing it, Arthur," she said one afternoon, showing him a model of a new solar array. "This is what you wanted." Arthur nodded, his eyes misty. "It's what we both wanted." Michael faded from the spotlight, his appeals faltering, his allies dwindling. He moved to a smaller firm, still wealthy but no longer a titan. Arthur heard he was bitter but didn't reach out. The wound was too deep. The words "hurry up" and "die too sharp." Arthur's final months were quiet. He stepped back, letting Clara lead. She transformed Caldwell Enterprises, making it a beacon of sustainable innovation. When Arthur passed, peacefully in his sleep, the company mourned but didn't falter. Clara took the helm. Her first act, a scholarship fund in Arthur's name for young engineers. At his memorial, Clara spoke, her voice breaking only once. "Arthur didn't just give me a company. He gave me a chance to build something better." The crowd, employees, board members, even strangers stood in applause. Clara stood at Arthur's grave later, a simple stone in Queens near the old hardware store. She placed a photo there, the same one from his desk, her, Arthur, and a younger Michael, smiling. "You didn't hurry," she whispered. "You built, and I'll keep building."